Hello there guys, it's me, and I decided to go live today as in the process of talking with the What the Flux podcast people. There was some interesting kind of messages and pokes that I thought would really work really well for a live video to talk to you guys about, and really kind of hit on some energies that are going on right now, some messages that I feel that need to be spoken. Hi, Natalie. And things that I think that need to be said. And I have the Women Who Run with the Wolves book in front of me for some quotes that came up today that I felt needed to be part of this video. I wanted to talk a little bit about this big 6-planet retrograde thing that's coming and we're in the process of getting into. Hello, everybody. Hi. I wanted to talk about connection. I want to talk about things coming to light. I want to talk about spirituality and what it means right now. And I'm going to actually start off by reading the Stitchermancy, if you like, which is when you read lines from books for divinational purposes. Hi, Gail. Because this came up and I think it was really important. 1 minute, let me find my mark. Okay. Do I want to start up here? Okay. Some think the times are past when if a woman was called wild, she was being cursed. If she was wild, meaning acting her natural soul self, then she was labeled wrong and bad. It is not that these times are over. What has changed are the types of behaviors that are considered out of control. For instance, in various parts of the world today, if a woman takes a stand politically, socially, spiritually, familiarly, environmentally, if she points out that some particular emperor has no clothes, or she speaks for those who are hurt or without voice, too often her motives are examined to see if she has gone wild, that is, crazy. For a wild child born into a rigid community, the usual outcome is to experience the ignominy of being shunned. Shunned treats the victim as if she does not exist. It withdraws spiritual concern, love, and other psychic necessities from that person. The idea is to force her to conform, or else kill her spirituality, and or to drive her from the that was interesting. Drive her from the village to languish and die in the outback. Courage means to follow the heart. It is not only the singular act that reshapes a dry collective, but the continuation of those acts. As a young Buddhist nun once told me, water drips through stone. This is from Women Who Run with the Wolves, in case you guys don't know. And the energy of something slow dripping has actually been really present. The slow build has definitely been a message to me of late. It's been in my dreaming. I've been dreaming about mermen and all sorts of to do with water and depth. We're entering into this retrograde, which is causing a lot of panic, a lot of fear. People are like throwing their arms up in the air that this is going to be a really difficult time because it requires self-reflection, self-introspection, the slow drip of the lessons that we have been learning, facing that other people are going to question who we are as individuals, question what our worth is, question us as human beings. And in this process, so too can we question who we are and whether we are worthy and whether we are the vile things that people have said or whether we are ourselves and what that means. And all of these planets in retrograde actually kind of churns up lessons that we've been through in the past and makes us re-examine that. Who are we? I think it's interesting in this time of introspective reflection to not forget that we are also interconnected, that we are community. I've been talking about perception and perspective, and today I released the hawk mask lesson, which has been a long time coming. How I think about masks in terms of spirituality is often at odds with the generalized, accepted, quote unquote, wisdom about masks. The generalized wisdom about masks is that they are there for trickery. They are there to deceive. They are there to take away from spirituality. They are there to lie. They are the mask of the trickster. This is not how I feel about masks whatsoever. I feel that the ancient magic of masks is when we take a mask and we look through the eyes of another in order to embody the energies, the spirit within that mask. We take those energies within ourselves and learn to see in a perspective that is not our own. So instead of only seeing from our one, sometimes misguided perspective, we learn to elevate ourselves beyond a singular understanding of the world around us. And recently, this has definitely been on my mind. This has been a lesson for me of late. How can I best understand other people? How can I best understand other individuals' perspectives, even if they're being hurtful, even if they're being harmful, even if they're being aggressive? How do I understand their emotional responses? How do I understand them as another legitimate human being without dehumanizing, without making it us versus them, without making them the enemy, without making them completely wrong, even if I feel wounded or harmed by the actions of the other individual, even if I know what the other individual is doing is, to my moral compass, incorrect or wrong, or at least to my knowledge is lies. I've been faced with these circumstances recently and had to take a good hard look at how I respond, which is something that is thrown around in spiritual community quite a lot. And it takes a lot of introspection to know and stand in your truth. The idea that we shouldn't respond to people is thrown around in terms of spirituality, and it's something I don't agree with. I don't agree with not having an emotional response. I think that cutting off our emotions is to wound us as human beings. It's to desensitize. It's to make us smaller. Magic comes from emotion. Magic comes from those things inside ourselves which truly, fuel for our magic. So to cut off emotional responses is not helpful. What is helpful is to analyze what we give away from that point. Do the other people need a response? Do we need to say something? Do we need to take a measure against it? Do we need to speak? Or is the best thing for us and possibly the other individual to be quiet on the situation, to reflect, to take time and go inside the self? This is definitely a huge lesson with retrogrades in general, is to reflect on the introspection, to be as within, so without, as within, so without, is a better representation of who we are and who we want to be and who we want to elevate and grow into. It's all too easy to make someone else into a kind of like an inferior human being, and that's a plague right now in the world. There is a plague of, this is my way, this is the right way, and your way is wrong. And that is a plague right now in the world. It's in the ether, it's in society, it's a real freaking issue, and it's dehumanizing other people. So what do? We lead by example and refuse to give into that mentality that gives birth to things like racism and sexism and homophobia and all the rest of it. We stand by other people, even if we don't fully agree with them. And this has definitely been a lesson for me of late. Who do I want to be going forward? I know who I am. I have moments where I doubt who I am. I think we all do. We have moments where we listen to that negative self-talk in our head and we think that we're a terrible human being. We listen to the voices of people who have told us that we are not worthy, not good enough, less than, nasty human beings. We listen to those voices sometimes. I think we all do. It's easier as human beings to focus on the negative points of ourselves than to elevate and really believe the good things, whether they come from outside of ourselves or within, usually both. So what do? I tell you what I did. I sat in light, which is a very uncomfortable thing for me. And light, to me, is when everything is revealed. I sat in light and looked at these things that were being said. I looked at where they were wounding me because I felt there may have been grains of truth in them. And then I really looked at them and I rejected them. Because what the grain of truth that I thought was seeing was actually negative self-talk, was things that had been told to me, and I believed it. Human beings are not inherently bad. I mean, you can make exceptions to this down the psychopath route if you wish. But for the majority of human beings are not inherently evil, bad, or good. These things are constructs to try and understand other people, to try and put our moral judgments, our moral lessons on other people. And to be honest with you, people are just a mixed bag of chaos. People have emotions, people have experiences, people make mistakes, people get things wrong in their interactions, as in so much as wrong can be, in that sometimes we don't remember that the other person has as much right to their feelings and their responses and their opinions as we do. And when we think that they don't, this becomes a problem. Retrograde in all these houses gives us that introspection into why we react the way we do. So then the lesson becomes, can we take ourselves outside of ourselves enough to understand why somebody else would not feel the way that we do? Can we take ourselves outside of ourselves enough to understand, or at least empathize, on why someone else's experiences or feelings or opinions are not ours, and allow them the right of that human experience without thinking that our human experience is more worthy of merit, of voice, or whatever it is? To me, recently, I've been sat in light of truth. This has been another light lesson. It's been a strange time for me lately because I prefer dark goddess energy, and this light lesson stuff is bizarre to me. But I honestly feel that light and darkness do not exist in polarity. They exist within one another. They are interwoven. They are woven. They are the fabric of life and death, and it is all woven in one great overarching web, one cosmic nexus. These things are not separate. When I have walked in the journeys in the underworld, I have walked around a labyrinth which was light and dark in equal measures, and it shifted around, judging on where I was and how the perception, the perspective of the underworld changed and flowed as I journeyed through it. And that's generally how the underworld tends to be, both looking like this world and yet not. And perception is a bit like the big lesson, like how we see the world, how we see ourselves, the visions that we carry forward, and the power that we give our perspectives and the perspectives of other people. So, do we fear retrogrades? And why? Honestly, no. I don't think that we should fear any astrology. I think fearing astrology is actually really detrimental, because if we fear something enough, we manifest that fear. Fear is a strong freaking emotion. Fear can drive human beings when we let it. Fear is, you know, problematic. So how do we come past that? We look for the lessons that we can learn. We have to remember, like in June, fear is the mind killer. Come back to a place of mind. Come back to a place of peace within the self. Look for the light. Stand in the truth of who you are and who you know yourself to be, and who you will allow yourself to grow and become. It's a difficult lesson to sit within light. There are times when people will come to you, they will accuse you, they will throw mud at you, they will lie about you. And what do you have to do? You have to stand in the truth of who you are. You are not who they say you are. So you have to embody that. You have to be that. You have to fulfill that seed within yourself and allow it to grow. You have to not give time to the negative self-talk. You have to figure out where the negative self-talk comes from and not allow it to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Take the path less traveled with your options. When the same path working, when the same decisions, when the same emotional responses leads to the same outcome, which is not good for you, choose the other path less traveled. For me, recently, this came into lessons of how I interact with women in particular, and sisterhood and community and what that meant. I've felt on occasion that women have come for me and mine and what is mine and been disrespectful. There are shadows within that. There are my own personal shadows within this process, because I know the negative self-talk in my head comes from my mother and others, but it says that women will come for what is yours. They will take what is yours. They don't give a shit about you. They will try and tear you down. And the sad truth is, in this world, there are people that will do that. But do we give that power? Who do we become if we're constantly on our guard looking for that? It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of pain, and it drags us down to a level that we don't want to be at. So we learn to identify that behavior within ourselves and within others. And when people are being truly disrespectful to the point that there is no mutual ground, then you create a boundary, you create a border, and you walk away. You do not allow that energy in your space. I'm not a big believer in cut ties left, right, here and there, like it means nothing, like human beings know nothing, which I think is like a spiritual bypassing thing, which turns up in spirituality. Just cut them out, they're toxic, get rid of them. That's not fair to individuals, that's not fair to people. But if the behavior is completely fucking with you on a mental and emotional level and you can't deal with it, then walking away is probably best for all involved. But I don't agree with like cutting people out left, right, and center, because you feel like your value of what they are and your decision that they're toxic for whatever reasons you've decided is more than their right to a fair listening, like a fair audience, like a fair shot at explaining themselves and finding a middle ground. Together is much stronger than all alone and isolating and my way or the highway. But if a continued pattern of toxicness does carry on, then protecting yourself is a viable and non-selfish option, as long as it is done with love. It doesn't have to be, screw you, fuck you, get out of my life, fuck off, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't have to be any of that. It can just be a quiet, peaceful separation. Honestly, for me, it has been a process of learning to honor and say to other women, we can stand side by side. It can often be difficult for me to say that I truly trust people in general, and women I do have somewhat of a more difficult time with sometimes as well. But for me, that has become a process of, if I do not trust anyone, I become hardened on the inside, and that fierce vulnerability, like Chris talks about, is not given the chance to deep root inside of myself and blossom. I sometimes feel a bit hippie talking about light and things because of the perception of it, but sometimes love is the answer. Giving people the opportunity to be human, to be flawed, to make mistakes, but not allow them to fuck you over repeatedly is an interesting middle line to walk. I will forgive people once. If I really love you, I will forgive you twice. But after that point, there has to be an element of self-respect. And I think the retrogrades and the self-reflection really bring that into sharp relief. Do you respect your values? What are your values? Why are they the way they are? Why have you created this perception of the world around you? And does it serve you? Does it nourish you? I'm beginning to feel like I should put aside the idea of what serves us and really embrace the idea of what nourishes us instead. I feel like the idea of what doesn't serve you kind of has a connotation of like wanting power over it. Whereas what nourishes you is just cosmic biology. Honestly, taking up what is nutrient rich and giving out other things that are nutrient rich in different ways is a form of personal alchemy, which is very necessary in the world right now. Very necessary. The world around us is tumultuous, is chaotic, is full of hatred, and the only way forward is sympathy, empathy, and love and understanding. When people are bickering and shouting and screaming, it can be troublesome. And I feel like, yeah, planting yourself in concrete. So what Chris is talking about with planting yourself in concrete is something that I came up with maybe over a year ago now. Geez, time moving on. And I was talking to Chris about don't plant yourself in concrete. And the idea of don't plant yourself in concrete is you cannot grow if you are determinedly planting yourself in environments that are not nutrient rich for your growth. Like, even, yes, you might be the hardiest little dandelion, like, screw it, I'm going through the cracks, I'm gonna build myself onto this concrete no matter what. But still, if you planted yourself in an environment which was nutrient rich and supportive, you would grow far more easily, far more vibrantly, and with more gusto. Something Chris touched on in the podcast, which is, I'm not going to go into too much depth because that's private for those guys, but is the ability to listen. And I think that she touched on something that was really, really strong there, and it kind of was vibing with me, and I was kind of like hearing messages and feeling that energy of, we really need to learn to listen to other people. And I mean, not to listen to respond, but to listen to understand. Because there is that phrase that we have conversations in order to respond, in order to prove who we are and how much we know. Instead, we should be listening to other people to share in that experience, share in that nourishment, share in understanding, and offering a measure of ourselves back in return. For when somebody offers you a part of themselves, you can graciously accept that and integrate that into your energy and listen and take on their lessons. And then when you have alchemized that, offer a part of yourself in return. That becomes balance rather than just to be like, here, take this that I have learned. It's a difficult thing. And I think that's why people are afraid of retrograde. And yeah, Chris said this quote, and she's just said it down here. So I'm probably going to upload this one to YouTube. We have two ears and one mouth for a reason. We should listen twice as much as we should speak. And honestly, I feel like the upcoming energies, particularly we were in a Cancer season, we're in water energies, we're in this retrograde season, and it's all about reflection. Is this who you want to be? Because when I find myself confronted with people who are saying things about me which would never in a million years have ever happened, things I would never say, things that I could laugh at because it's so ridiculous, I have a choice. I can be offended, which certainly is an option when people are saying vile, vile things, or I can sit here in the light of what I know to be true. I can offer you a measure of understanding instead, and I will still sit here in the light of what I know to be true, because the interesting thing about the truth is it needs no defense. I sat with myself in that moment and sat with how ridiculous it was to me for this reason and that reason and this reason. And then I realized that I was coming up with like a defense, and I didn't need a defense because I was sitting in the light of my truth. And that is possibly the safest space there is in retrograde. Finding the truth of who you are. If you need to apologize for things when you've hurt people, then apologize. If you need to come to better understanding with another individual, own the bits that you don't understand so you can have a real conversation. Own the bits that you feel were a mistake and you erred and you may have hurt them. That's showing people respect and love. and a willingness on the inside to grow. If you feel that, you know, this situation has come at you and has no truth to it and you don't know where on earth it's coming from, you can guess, but you know, we're always guessing in that circumstance. But you don't really need to defend that. You don't need to defend yourself in that place. You just need to be honest and sit in that light. And it's peculiar to me because light lessons are interesting. They are a little bit outside the box for me. And I'm always interested that I feel like I'm going to feel like a hippie for saying these things. Again, value judgments, perception, and perspectives that come into who we are. All lessons, though, are good. All lessons are great. And they can all help us. They can all nourish us. They can all help us to grow. So with this retrograde, with this light lessons, with this sharp contrast of things and truth coming to light, sit in the light of who you are is the best advice I can think to give you. So that's going to be it for this little video. Thank you guys for bearing with me. Many blessings.